I'd like you to imagine your dream life. See the version of you who has what you want to have, feels how you want to feel, and is who you want to be. I'm Brittany Hoops, your hypnotherapist and manifestation coach, and this is the show where I'll teach you to master the full power of your mind, to guide you on your journey towards destination manifestation.
Take a step back for the ones who can't.
All right, my gorgeous destination manifestation travelers, how are you? If you're watching the YouTube version of the show, which, by the way, I don't know if you are on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you might not know there's a video version of the show. There is. It's on YouTube. And if you're watching it, you might notice just how absolutely crisp and clear I look today. I got a new webcam that is like all the, bells and whistles, HD, whatever. And so I'm looking particularly crisp. You can see all my beautiful pores now. No, you can't. I filter those out. Keeping it real. Anyways, welcome back to the show. We are back with part 2 of our Neuroscientific manifestation series. Ooh, it's good stuff, y'all. This is the series where I'm diving into the nitty-gritty of what it means to use that beautiful tool that comes for free with the hardware that is your body. I bet you guessed it. It's your brain. And it plays a crucial role, or I guess I should say, it abides by many rules that play crucial roles in helping us manifest the results that we desire, right? So if you haven't listened to part 1, go back, just rewind an episode, catch up with us. Back in part 1, we dove into all the fun aspects of neuroplasticity and the reticular activating system and lots of other big fancy words that you'll understand if you listen to it. And essentially what we're trying to understand is how you can use your knowledge of these, components of your brain to actually manifest. Because here's the thing. I could just shout brain terminology at you, although I doubt you would enjoy that episode very much, so I won't. But there are plenty of neuroscientists that have plenty of podcast episodes that can do just that, right? I'm not a neuroscientist, but yet I'm a hypnotherapist. So my lens of all this and all my understanding of all this is through the practical application of all this stuff. So a neuroscientist, I kind of like to think is like sort of like a mechanic of a car. And I'm kind of like the Formula One driver. Although I do think in past episodes, I have compared myself to a mechanic. Sometimes I'm the mechanic, sometimes I'm not. This case, I'm the driver, right? And it's great to understand how the car works. We all need to understand generally, but pure understanding isn't going to allow you to drive that car, right? You really want to know how to drive it. You want to know how to drive it fast. You want to know how to drive it safely. And so if you know how to drive your car, that is going to allow you to go to your destination manifestation. See what I did there? So let's dive in. I want you to be able to drive straight towards your manifestations. That is the goal of today. So when it comes to manifesting, I would say that the worst that could happen to you is that you're unable to overcome resistance. That's kind of like the catch-all worst case scenario when it comes to manifesting, right? And we know how tricky resistance can be, and we know how it can keep your manifestations from materializing. And the tricky thing about resistance is that you can kind of get stuck in this limbo, right? Where you desire the thing that you want to manifest, and yet you've built up so much resistance to it through limiting beliefs, negative thoughts, behaviors that aren't aligned, all these things that you're kind of caught in this quicksand, right? This catch-22. And it's like you're stuck and you want to move forward, but you can't move forward. And you're wondering why none of your manifestations are materializing. And well, that's precisely why, right? So that's why I want to talk about our next neuroscientific concept. And it's the concept of cognitive dissonance. Okay. Now this sounds scary, but it isn't. Okay. Cognitive dissonance is responsible for most of your resistance when it comes to manifesting. So cognitive dissonance is created when there's a mismatch. Okay. A mismatch between your current reality, what you're living here right now, and your desired reality. That you want to manifest, right? So you say, I want a job that pays me twice as much as I currently make. That's what you want to manifest, right? But then you pick up your paycheck on a Friday, you look at the number on that paycheck, and it's only half of that, right? It's what you currently make. It's not double. So there's a mismatch between the double income that you want and your current reality of the single income, right? Another form of cognitive dissonance is a mismatch between what you want, let's just use that double paycheck example, right? And what you believe is possible for you. Ooh, I feel like I just hit the nail on the head, right? I feel like that kind of cognitive dissonance is what most of us go, yeah, I'm feeling the dissonance, okay? What's so interesting about this is that we can also explain this same concept from kind of a spiritual, energetic perspective too. That's why I love all of this. We can explain it scientifically and we can explain it spiritually, and they do not have any cognitive dissonance. They are perfectly matched, which is just like makes my little heart happy, right? So your beliefs, which is, we know beliefs are just thoughts that you keep thinking. Your beliefs need to be what we call a vibrational match to your manifestation. So another reason why you should be watching this on YouTube is I am using my hands and my fingers to illustrate a lot of things for you right now. And so if you aren't watching this, imagine my little wiggling fingers are either matching or they're mismatching, right? And so your beliefs in order to manifest need to be what we call a vibrational match to that manifestation. Meaning that each thought you have, each belief you hold, has an associated energetic vibration to it. So Dr. Joe Dispenza calls this an energetic signature. And I sort of kind of like that, right? It sort of reminds me of like a barcode you would scan, right? And so it's like your thought has a barcode and then your manifestation has a matching barcode. And unless those barcodes are exactly aligned, you're not going to manifest that thing. So now a thought like, I could never make that kind of money, that has a very different signature or energetic pattern than a thought like, that double paycheck is made for me. You feel the difference there? Those are two very different thoughts. So I have to ask you this. Do we have any other synesthetics out there? I think that's how you say it. Synesthetics, people who have synesthesia. Fun fact. I personally have mirror synesthesia, but I do wish that I had other forms of synesthesia too. Like I would love to be able to like associate words with colors or hear smells or I don't know. There's a bunch of different ones, right? I'd be really curious if there's any listeners who do have other forms of synesthesia besides mirror synesthesia. I'd be curious if those two thoughts, right, or really any two mismatched, cognitively dissonant thoughts, if they do have different colors or different smells or some sort of sensory differences to those. I'd be really curious to know that because there's such different vibrations, right? And so my guess would be, yeah, there is a difference there. I'd be curious though to hear you guys' thoughts on that, if that is true or not. So we've seen this dissonance, we've seen this difference in thoughts play out in lots of different scientific studies. I'm going to find a YouTube video of this study that I'm talking about, and I'll link it in the show notes. But we've seen the effects of crystals forming in water crystals, based on when the scientists would speak kindly to the water or would speak harshly or negatively to the water. Different patterns are created in the water with the crystals based on these very different vibrational thoughts. There's also been other studies done on the effects of speaking kindly or harshly to plants, living organisms, right? So you can imagine the kindly spoken to plants. They are vibrant, they're thriving, they're living their best life, right? These great plants, while the negatively spoken to plants are just like withering up and dying, right? Both are given the same amount of sunlight, same water, same environment. The only difference is the difference in the vibration of thought or the energy that is directed to that, right? So here's where this gets like important. You and I are just big old plants, right? We're living organisms, or better yet, we're vibrational receivers. So that's why it's so important that we use this vibrational receiving mechanism that we have, which is our brain, to broadcast high, positive vibrational signals through our thoughts. So when you have mismatched thoughts, you can feel the emotional differences between the two based on how you feel and the emotions that you feel when you think them, right? You feel that viscerally in your body. So you could think, oh, I'll never make that kind of money. And boom, you're down, you're wallowing, you're dejecting, like, right? You feel the vibration of that thought. That's a shriveled up plant thought, right? Shriveled up money thought, I should say. But when you think, and not only think, but when you believe that double paycheck is made for me, yes, it's mine. I mean, you can already see in like my mannerisms if you watch the YouTube video. Is this whole podcast episode just going to be me plugging YouTube? Maybe. Well, you can tell that when you think that thought, right? You're jiving, you're grooving, you're halfway to the Apple store, you're about to buy your new iPhone, like you're feeling good, right? That is a thriving plant, a thriving organism thought. So we can feel the emotional and the vibrational dissonance there, right? And it's amazing to learn that the brain experiences this dissonance too. So your brain strives for consistency between your thoughts, your beliefs, and your actions, okay? Because we know a thought, if you think it enough and enough and enough, it strengthens into a belief. When you have beliefs, they create emotional responses within your body. When you're feeling emotionally a certain way, that either motivates or demotivates your actions. It's how you make sense of the world, okay? So if you take a singular thought and you think that thought again and again and again, it gets promoted, or rather I should say strengthened into a belief. We learned all about that last episode, right? When we talked about neuroplasticity. But we can also take this one step further. Your brain also wants your actions to those thoughts and those beliefs to match too. So what's interesting, it's usually the actions that are the thing that get our attention. I would say, working with hundreds of clients, I would say, usually a client won't come to me because a thought is bothering them. They'll come to me because they're either doing an action they don't want to do or they're not doing an action that they want to do. I can't tell you how many times I'll have a client that comes to see me for hypnotherapy and coaching, and they'll say something like, Brittany, I really want to manifest a loving life partner, but I just can't get myself to go out on the dates. And like, they're smart people. Of course, I'm biased. Anybody who comes to see me, I think, is a smart person. But objectively, my clients are very smart people. They realize that it's very unlikely that they are going to fall in love, meet a life partner, get married if they don't go out on dates. Like, they recognize that, like that fairy tale movie scenario where you just bump into the guy on the road and you drop all your papers and you lock eyes and instantly in love. That's like very rare, right? That's probably not going to happen. So they realize, hey, I want to manifest a loving life partner, but I can't get myself to go out on dates. I'm not on any of the dating apps. I know I want this relationship, but I dread doing any of the actions that will help me get there. Like, what's wrong, right? That's why they come to me. Now, that's a prime example of some cognitive dissonance right there, right? So the actions that they're taking, or in this case, not taking, not going out, and their desires are not lining up. They don't match up, right? The actions and the manifestation are not a vibrational match, and that's why they're resisting taking that action. But I would bet you anything that the thought they are thinking and the actions, or in this case, inaction that they're not taking, they do match up. They are a vibrational match. And that's the problem, right? So usually when I speak to this kind of person, this kind of client, I'll ask them, I'll say, okay, so you're not going on dates. I hear you. When you make that decision to not go on the apps, to not go to the local trivia night or speak to that cute guy or girl in line at the grocery store, how are you feeling when you don't take that action, when you resist that action? I want to get down to the core of the feeling that's separating their action to their thoughts. And so the answer is usually something like, Brittany, I'm feeling down on myself. I'm disappointed. I'm embarrassed. I'm self-conscious, things like that, right? And then I ask them a very simple question. I ask, how come? The question, how come or why, is a simple and effective question that helps you figure out the thought that's hidden behind that emotion, the thought that's creating that emotional response. And then they end up saying something like, oh, I'm out of his league, or she wouldn't want to date me, or I'm sure he's probably already has a girlfriend. That's why, right? So you can see it's those kind of thoughts that are a direct match to the emotions of feeling down on yourself, of feeling disappointed in yourself and feeling embarrassed, self-conscious. And wouldn't you know, when you feel that way, when you're vibrating in that emotional frequency, which is a very low vibe frequency, you don't put yourself out there on dates. You don't. I wouldn't. No one would. Who felt that way. Feeling down on yourself doesn't motivate you to want to date. It just doesn't. I mean, so that's how cognitive dissonance works, right? That's how it can work against you. But now I want to look at it because, okay, that's all fine and dandy, right? We know how it prevents our manifestations. How can it help us manifest? How can we use it to work for us? Well, if you consistently affirm a goal that you haven't yet achieved, right? Let's continue with the dating example. And when I say affirm, I mean you aren't thinking those old thoughts of all the reasons why it couldn't work out for you. Instead, you start thinking the opposite, right? You think, I'm ready to meet my soulmate, or I know the perfect person is out there looking for me too, or I don't know. I'm trying to think. A lot of times I hear with clients like, oh, I've missed my timing. Like that's a negative thought, but they'll be like, oh, it's too late for me. Here's an opposite thought to that. I'm going to meet my soulmate in the right time and the right way. I'm going to meet my soulmate in the right timing with the right way, or something like that. Okay. We can workshop it. Right. But something that makes you feel and believe like, hey, my soulmate is out there for me. This is the perfect timing. Right. Whatever sort of belief makes you feel nice and good and excited and optimistic and lovey and excited about your future partner, that thought, that new thought, I call this a 180 thought, okay? Because it's a complete opposite, a complete 180-degree shift from the negative thought you were having before. So how I usually like to describe it is like, I want you to imagine the negative thought is like you had a flashlight and you were just shining it straight into your eyes. And you're like, ow, my eyes burn. This negative thought burns. It does not feel good, right? And so this 180 thought is you taking that flashlight and you flipping it around and you pointing that flashlight out into your future so that you can see where you're going. The light's no longer in your eyes. It's shining a path to show you where to go next. So that's a 180 thought. When you affirm that 180 thought and you repeat that belief and you send that instruction to your brain, well, the brain is going to go, alert, alert, alert. Okay, this is a dramatic interpretation of the brain, okay? I don't think there's actually an alert or an alarm in the brain, but it does kind of remind me of those Inside Out movies, which I love, by the way. I think I remember talking about seeing Inside Out when I first saw it. I don't know. Maybe that was this summer when I was taking a break. But when I watched the movie Inside Out 2, it literally brought tears to my eyes because my little hypnotherapist heart was so happy. It felt like I was watching like what happens in my clients' minds as I do sessions, which was like really cool. Anyways, that's a tangent. When you affirm that positive 180 belief and you send that instruction to your brain, the brain figuratively goes, alert, alert, alert. There's cognitive dissonance here. She isn't going out on dates. And yet she now believes that she's beautiful and worthy and she's going to find love. That can't do, right? This no longer matches. So what's going to happen is your brain is going to work to resolve that dissonance by now aligning your behaviors and your perceptions to match this new positive 180 belief. So this is what I mean when I say cognitive dissonance can work for you, right? So you start thinking these positive, confident 180 thoughts. You start feeling yourself, I guess I should say. You start feeling good. You start glowing. You got that single girl glow going on. Your friend then asks you to go to a concert with a group of her friends. She says there's going to be a cute guy there. You now say yes. because you're putting yourself into new situations now. That's your brain resolving the dissonance. The perceptions around you begin to shift and change. Just like how we talked about the RAS in the last episode, the lens in which you view your world literally allows you to see more cute guys around you or girls or whoever you're into, right? Your brain couldn't be able to see or process or notice that before, but now it can. Simply because the instructions that you gave your mind through your thoughts have shifted. Isn't that just wild? I think that literally is my biggest mind-blowing moment. I know we talked all about it last episode, but the idea that our brain doesn't let us recognize, it's kind of like, well, I think I mentioned this last episode, right? When you learn a new word or you see a new car and then you start seeing it or hearing that word all the time. It existed before. Your brain was just filtering it out. And I think it's nuts that our brains can quite literally filter out our manifestations and the opportunities for our manifestations simply because we've been so locked into negative beliefs. And I just think that's nuts, Before, your neighbor was just some guy you saw walking his dog every week, and now you see him and you're like, ooh la la, right? You notice how tall, dark, and handsome he is. Your brain didn't let you see that before, even something that was right in front of your eyes. You couldn't notice that before when you were instructing your brain to think, no one wants to date me. Then your brain's like, oh, let's show her no one to date her. And then you look around and you say, oh, it's LA that's so hard to date. And I'm like, girl, it's not LA. It's your beliefs about LA or Dallas or whatever location, you happen to be in. It's so funny. I'll literally have that happen. I'll have clients come to see me for manifesting dating. And they'll be like, oh, but Houston is so hard to date in. No, there's no good people in Houston. And then I'll have another client who lives in New Jersey, and they're like, I'm going to move to the South because it's just so hard to date in New Jersey. And I'm going to move to the South. Supposedly there's nicer girls there. And it's like, don't you know, I just hung up with a client that complained about how hard it is to date in the South. It's not the location, people. It's your thoughts. But that's why we do this work, right? So you can see now why these manifestation techniques that we employ, like repeating positive affirmations, which is just a fancy way of saying repeating positive thoughts, utilizing visualization, and how this can help sort of soften and shift our belief systems over time. So we want to create belief systems that match our manifestations. Now, cognitive dissonance comes into play in what I call kind of the messy middle of manifestation, which is why I'm really glad we're talking about it here. Because it's during sort of this messy middle. You've already kind of started to shift your beliefs. You've already started to find those 180 thoughts, but your 3D reality around you hasn't caught up yet. And this part of the process can really sort of foul some people up, right? Because they're like, Brittany, I'm doing all the right things. I'm thinking and believing positive thoughts now. I got the 180 thoughts. Every time I notice myself having a negative thought, I create it into a 180, but nothing's changing. What's up? And that's when I usually tell them, please keep with it. There's going to be some cognitive dissonance in your brain for the first little bit, but you got to let the brain catch up. You got to let the brain recognize and realize, wow, her belief isn't the same as it was before. Therefore, I got to get to work. I'm speaking as the brain. I got to get to work resolving this dissonance and inspiring her to take different actions and to perceive different inputs in her environment that will match these new beliefs. That takes a little bit of time. Your brain is a physical hardware. It's a physical mechanism. So it's in the reality of time and space. It's in our 3D reality. It's not instant like 5D inner mind is. You can just think of something and it's created in your inner mind. The brain itself in our 3D reality is a physical mechanism, so it takes time. It abides by the laws of time, right? So I like to think of it this way. Sometimes it kind of feels like a big old shipping container boat, right? That it's turning. It's doing a big 180 in the ocean. you can't make a quick U-turn if you're the captain of that boat, right? If you did that, you'd capsize. Everyone would be going overboard. So sometimes it's a slow and deliberate process. That's why I say with your hypnotherapy audios, like listen to them again and again and again. It's all in the repetition. It's all in the resolving of this cognitive dissonance. So the more cognitive dissonance your brain has to overcome and to correct, that's usually an indicator of the amount of resistance that you had on the subject. Okay. And usually, I don't want to say like hard and fast rules, but if you have a lot of resistance, then it's going to take a lot of releasing and dissolving of the resistance. And that's just going to take a little bit more time. And that's okay. It doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It just means like you just got a bigger hole to climb out of. And that's all right. So things that you don't have very much resistance to manifesting, like maybe a parking spot or finding a penny on the ground, those things tend to manifest real fast, right? Because there's little cognitive dissonance to resolve there. You anticipated that you would find a parking spot, therefore you did. Boom, you're good, right? Here's where I want to kind of clear up. So I feel like somebody's going to be like, but Brittany, it's just as easy to manifest a button as it is a castle. That's what Abraham Hicks always says, right? And I would say absolutely true, right? The universe can equally manifest both. I'm not judging the universe's capability. What I'm saying is that your brain needs to resolve. Sorry, I keep on messing with my hair. My hair keeps on coming out. You know what? Let's just hair break. There we go. Sorry. Don't watch the YouTube, or watch the YouTube, then you would have known I kept on messing with my hair. Anyways, what I'm saying is that the universe equally can manifest both, but it's your brain that needs to resolve the cognitive dissonance to sort of allow it in. So when you mentally rehearse having your desire, especially when you're in that state of hypnosis while you do it, that's going to be the place where your brain starts to accept that new version of reality at the deepest subconscious level. That's going to then influence your decision making and your behavior, which will then bring in your manifestation into existence, into 3D reality. It goes from being in 5D in your inner mind to 3D. You can test it, you can touch it, you can taste it, you can smell it, you can sense it, that sort of reality. So let's just use kind of our typical hypnotherapy examples. These are sort of like the things that most people think of when we talk about hypnosis. So I like to use them as examples sometimes. Usually it's stop smoking and losing weight. Those are like your traditional hypnotherapists, like who you would go to a hypnotherapist, right? Go to see, right? So you do your hypnotherapy. You affirm in your mind, I eat healthy foods. I'm no longer interested in sweets and processed food, right? These are the new thoughts. These are the 180 thoughts. You see, you feel, you experience yourself eating those healthy foods during your hypnosis. You visualize it in your inner mind. You might even salivate as you crave those healthy foods. You visualize yourself enjoying them, right? Nom, 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 nom. That's me eating the healthy foods. You see yourself enjoying going for long walks, going to the gym, taking care of your body. You visualize this daily, right? This is what you do in your 5D inner mind. Your brain, which is in a deeply relaxed and very malleable state when you're in hypnosis, is now starting to accept these new instructions. The subconscious mind is creating new patterns and beliefs. It's identifying with this new image of you that you've created, this new self-concept of you. And then when you come out of your hypnosis and you go to the fridge, you find yourself grabbing an apple instead of an old candy bar, and you start to eat it and you go, wait, wow, that was so easy. Why was that so easy? You start to surprise yourself, right? I can't tell you how many clients I have that were like, wait, why did I do that? Almost like they're surprised by themselves that their actions have changed. And I'm like, girl, you've been practicing new thoughts. When you practice new thoughts, new actions happen. So your behavior is now matching the belief you've created because you softened and resolved any cognitive dissonance that was in the brain on that subject. And that's why hypnosis and hypnotherapy is so vital for resolving and dissolving cognitive dissonance. So It's your behavior that brings your manifestation, which in this case was having a healthy body, into existence. So this example I just gave was for weight loss because I think most people associate hypnosis with weight loss or quitting smoking or things like that. But it can be applied to any manifestation. And I mean any, okay? That's why I personally specialize in hypnotherapy for manifestation. That's the kind of clients I work with, right? I've used the same brain training process for manifesting my own business, for getting on Big Brother, for finding my soulmate and husband, for affording and building our dream home, for paying off over $200,000 worth of student loans. I mean, we've manifested free vacations. Like the list just goes on and on and on and on about what you could apply this to, right? The opportunities are truly endless. And I think that's great news, right? Because then that shows us that like anything we can put our mind to, we can achieve. That's what manifestation is. So let's talk about another aspect. I started to touch on it a little bit, but let's talk about another aspect of the brain that's also at play here, okay? The role of mirror neurons. So if you're unfamiliar, mirror neurons are these specialized brain cells that respond when we perform an action or when we observe someone else performing that action, right? And so they play a significant role for us when we're learning because they are activated when we imitate or when we see someone else doing something like young children do, right? How many times do you see like young kids? I saw this really funny reel the other day that was showing like babies and like young toddlers like copying their parents. And it was like so cute. They were like walking with a limp because their dad had a broken leg or something. And yet this baby was walking with a limp. It was like looking towards its dad of like, how should I walk? And because the dad had a broken leg, the baby was then walking like it had a broken leg. And it's just, it's funny because little kids imitate, right? Brains learn through imitation. Or mirror neurons can be fired, I should say, during mental rehearsal and visualization, which is what we experience during hypnotherapy. So obviously, this application of it is really exciting and cool because this is something that we can use and we can do. Now, I feel like I'm personally especially equipped to talk about mirror neurons because I happen to have some very high caliber, exceptional mirror neurons, like I mentioned before. I have something called mirror synesthesia. So if you've never heard of that before, how it plays out for me, and there's lots of different ways that it can manifest for different people. But whenever I see something, and usually it's like in a movie, thank God I don't encounter it in life all that much. But whenever I see something visually, when I see someone else feeling something, or when I'm experiencing something, I'll feel and experience it myself to a very high degree. So it's like empathy, but it's on steroids, right? So I have to be very careful about what I watch on movies and TV, like no gory scenes. My husband has now learned, like, if there's something like gory, he'll be like, close your eyes. Like he knows. Cause like if I see it, it will like hurt in my own body. I'm not kidding. It's very painful. It's almost as if it's like happening to me, but I would say not. I hope not at the full severity, but like half the severity maybe. Okay. So if somebody like breaks their arm, like, ow, my arm aches, like it hurts. So on the positive side of this, though, I'm incredibly empathetic and I tend to understand and read people really, really well, which, comes in handy as a hypnotherapist, I would say. It comes in handy every single session I do. When someone's experiencing joy, I usually experience it right along with them as if it was my own. That's why I'm always telling my clients, like, oh, I have full body goosebumps because like I'll feel it in my body when they have this like aha or this breakthrough moment or like this, realization. I will feel it in my body too. So I remember actually a quick story with this. I remember during Big Brother, if you're unfamiliar with Big Brother, it's, reality TV show. We play all this different competition games. And there's this one very important competition that's played every week called the head of household, the HOH. And so if you won HOH, you would receive a letter from home, which is like your only point of contact to the outside world and your loved ones. And like, it's a really big deal, right? And so I would remember when I was in Big Brother that whenever somebody would win a HOH, they would read their letters out loud to the rest of us because we were excited to hear from them too. And no matter if the HOH person was crying or not, I would be crying every single time. Like, they might not even be crying, but I would be crying. And it was always happy tears, like every time for them. Like, it was just something about, like, my brain used its mirror neurons very well. It put myself into the perspective of that other person, of the HOH, to be in their shoes, to feel like what it would feel like to hear from your loved ones and to hear these words of affirmation and love and reassurance. And like, it was just so powerful that it would always just overwhelm my emotional system. It would bring me to tears every single time. And like I said, this comes in handy when I work with my hypnotherapy clients. I'm never like crying if they're crying though. Luckily with hypnotherapy, I'm really good, and I had to build this up. I really, truly did. But I'm very good at sort of like putting that healthy, energetic boundary to like, I mean, I'm not like stone cold, but like, if a client is crying or if a client's feeling a big emotion, being able to see it from a third person perspective and like consciously put myself into that perspective, because that's the perspective I'm trying to guide them to also access as well. But that was something I definitely had to learn. I remember when I first started being a hypnotherapist, that was the number one question I asked my mentor. I'm like, oh my God, I'm just exhausted at the end of a day. Like, how do you do this? Like, cause I was taking on the emotions of all my clients. And that was the first thing that my mentor said was like, yeah, you need to develop some boundaries, and gave me some really good, practices for that. So that's all to say. That's mirror neurons, and your brain does this too. Even if you don't have mirror synesthesia, you're still doing this, okay? And you don't literally have to feel it in your body in order to do this. How mirror neurons work and how they help us with manifesting is that when we use these visualization techniques like we use during hypnotherapy, we're activating these mirror neurons within the brain. So these mirror neurons essentially allow your brain to simulate the experience of achieving a goal before it actually happens in your 3D reality. So I know we talked about this a few episodes ago. If you want to go back to the episode on how to manifest the life you want through identity shifting, we go all into this. But we talked about how you should celebrate in your mind before celebrating achieving your manifestation in real life. You remember that? So when you do that, it's your mirror neurons that activate during that practice. So that's what makes it feel so real to you, just as if you were experiencing it in your 3D waking reality. So this mental rehearsal of achieving your desire, it prepares your brain for real world action. So it creates a sense of safety and familiarity within this action, which in turn reduces your fear and your resistance to making this change. Right? It's kind of like exposure therapy in a way. So let's just say you had a phobia. I'll just use the example of snakes. Okay. You might decide to go to a traditional therapist that specializes in exposure therapy, those kind of techniques, right? And they would probably suggest to you to spend some time with snakes to overcome that phobia. You might have to work your way up to it. Maybe first you would look at pictures of snakes. Then maybe you'd read books about snakes. Then eventually they'd want you to come in contact with a snake to overcome that phobia. So the idea being that if you just had the opportunity to be around the snake, then your brain would learn that nothing bad was going to happen as long as you were safe, right? And careful. And therefore that snake is now familiar to be around, and your brain is familiar to be around these snakes. Now, think about it this way. Imagine you had a job where you worked out in the wilderness every single day. You were around snakes all the time. You would be quite familiar with them, and therefore most likely not as scared as someone who never sees a snake, right? Who's very unfamiliar with it. Of course, I will say this does sometimes backfire, right? Like think about like people like Steve Irwin, right? Remember him? He got so comfortable around those dangerous animals that he sometimes became careless, right? And he took major risks, and then that ended up killing him. But he's the outlier, okay? You are not Steve Irwin. I am not Steve Irwin. Most of us, if we build up familiarity, that actually helps us overcome, these sort of phobias, right? Being around a snake during exposure therapy would most likely help you overcome that fear. Or that's what traditional exposure therapy therapists do, right? Or you don't physically have to do it, okay? You could instead do exposure therapy through hypnotherapy, which means You're using those same mirror neuron mechanisms within your brain, but without having to handle any real life snakes. You know what's funny? This is a little bit of a tangent, but making me think about snakes. If you are a millennial, or I don't know, maybe if you're younger or older, I don't know if they still do this or not, but did you ever go to a school assembly in elementary school and then just like randomly you were holding a big snake? That happened to me. And I saw somebody post a meme the other day that really made me laugh. That happened to me, that they were like, you know, who just showed up to school and who was that snake man and why was he qualified to bring his snakes to our school? And I literally remember my school, they asked for volunteers, which, you know, I was a little drama queen actress girl. So of course I raised my hand. I always wanted to go on stage and I got selected. And they basically said, you know, put out your arms and close your eyes. How rude is this? Like, this is just creating trauma for a whole generation of students. But anyways, I close my eyes and I hold out my hands and all of a sudden I open my eyes and there's a boa constrictor, like spanning the length of our gymnasium where this assembly was held. And like me and like 10 other children are holding it. Like, without telling us there was going to be a snake in our arms, which I'm like, I think at the time I just was shocked and, you know, didn't really realize like what that was. But like, anyways, these assemblies are keeping me in business, by the way. So anyways, we don't have to actually hold snakes is the point to overcome said phobia. We can use our mirror neurons. So I don't know about you, but I would most definitely pick the hypnotherapy route, especially since it activates the same areas in the brain as real life exposure therapy does. So this still builds up that familiarity, that safety, especially when we pair these images and sensations in your inner mind with feelings of peace. We can anchor feelings of peace, the feelings of calm and peace along with the visual, you know, inner mind imagery of snakes, right? We can create those subconscious associations and patterns that way. Anyway, I love to nerd out on this stuff. I find it very interesting. It's what I work when I work with clients on phobias, whether it's snakes or tornadoes or flying or public transportation or anything, right? You name it. If you can be scared of it, you can use your mirror neurons to become familiar with it too, right? And then you can use those mirror neurons to build up safety and familiarity with your wild and crazy dreams, with your manifestations as well. We love to use mirror neurons for that. So we want the brain to think, yeah, that manifestation, it's just a normal, natural part of my everyday life. Check. Thumbs up. I'm familiar with it. Great, right? We want you to be exposed fully to it so that the brain believes that it's possible for you. That's why I love to visualize myself with my manifestations in hypnotherapy in just my normal day-to-day circumstances. Like that's my go-to visualization. So I've shared with you all that I'm in the process of manifesting growing my family, right? So when I'm in hypnotherapy, which I do every day, I will just picture me and my baby at the park. My baby's in the stroller. It's just me in my normal workout clothes. Sometimes I'll even visualize myself in my visualization wearing the same clothes that I am in real life. Like I didn't need no fancy outfit for it. It's just what I already own, right? I'm going to the grocery store. There's nothing groundbreaking here. There's nothing crazy. It's all very safe, familiar, normal situations, right? You want to manifest your soulmate? I want you to visualize you hanging out on the couch and you guys are both eating chips and watching a Netflix show together, right? The most normal evening you could imagine. It's fun to imagine the romantic dates and the first kiss and all that stuff. Like do that too, but also instill the normal things that just would be normal part of life with your manifestations so that the brain can become familiar with them. Let your brain notice how much is still so familiar in your life that the only addition here is that manifestation. What might still be the same even with the addition of your manifestation in your life? We want the brain to associate your manifestation with familiarity and with safety. So a kind of interesting story. I had a client who was visualizing her manifestation of her new business that she was, launching. And she noticed that in the warehouse of this business, she noticed that her college diploma was hanging on the wall. And it was her college diploma for a degree that she got in a completely different area, that she was no longer using because she had this business. And yet she was still so proud of her journey, of her route, of everything that she did to get there, right? That she hung the college diploma on the wall too. And she was proud of it. So For her, to see that college diploma on the wall, it was normal, it was natural, it was real. It makes your visualization that much more attainable and real to your subconscious mind when you interject these very real and sort of normal details into it. It reminds you that not everything has to change in your life to allow this manifestation to come through. I think that's really important to recognize. I think sometimes we think our whole lives have to be overhauled in order to become who we want to be or to manifest the things that we want to manifest. Like, I visualize my baby in my house, even if it's dirty. Now, this is kind of an unfair thing to say because I'm a neat freak. Like, my house is not ever dirty. In fact, it's like a little sterile. But the point being, I don't need to be this perfect person living in like a 10,000 square foot mansion that's spotless in order for me to have a baby. Like, it's just me in my house, even with the laundry that still needs to be folded, right? But I have a baby. And actually, there's probably more laundry that needs to be folded because I have a baby, right? So you see, we want the brain to realize how normal your manifestation is. It makes it much more likely to accept it as your new reality because your brain is only ever trying to keep you safe. And so if it can know that when you manifest this desire and you make this new change to your life, if it can know that you will still be safe while doing it, boom, manifestation allowed, brain shifted, cognitive dissonance released. It will start to create the motivation and the perceptions you need to shift those actions and notice and welcome those new opportunities that are going to allow that manifestation to swoop on in. Make sense? Whew, that was a lot. We covered cognitive dissonance and mirror neurons here today. I hope you enjoyed this. I freaking love this series. I'm having so much fun and there's still so much more to cover. So this is part 2 of, I think will be part 4 parts. That's what I'm planning out. Okay. 4 parts. So be sure to tune in next episode to part 3. We're going to cover emotional regulation and manifestation as well as behavioral psychology and the law of action. I think we get into a few other things too that I can't remember. So this is my absolute favorite thing to geek out on. I hope you're enjoying it too. So if this resonated with you, let me know because we can do more episodes like this. Like this is my jam. So if you love this episode and you're like, yes, I want my brain on board. I want to do this. I want to work with my brain to manifest all this. Then I actually have a training that I think you're really, really, really going to love. It's a completely free training and it's called Your Blueprint to Manifest with Ease. Okay. So if you have ever questioned the timing of your manifestation, this training, like I wrote it just for you. Okay. I'm going to drop the link to it in the show notes. So be sure to check that out. You can find it there. Go back and listen to part 1 of this neuroscientific manifestation series, and I'll catch you in part 3. Bye.
I don't know.